I have an exam coming up. I have a test coming up. Yeah, I'm really, really worried about it.
Is this thing on?
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Voice Podcast. This is the podcast for students by students. I'm Ellie Steele, and today I'm joined by Cheryl Robinson. Cheryl is professor in general arts and science. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at the college, Cheryl?
Sure. I teach personal stress management in the general arts and science program and also in the general education program.
Excellent, excellent. So today I wanted to share a technique that you and I have talked about many times, and I've actually presented to some of your classes, and you have some familiarity with it, and it's called EFT. So it's a technique, emotional freedom techniques it's called, and it's a basic technique of self-help, tapping on acupuncture meridians. So we're gonna give a little demo so people can use it, and we're gonna use it specifically for exam stress or test stress, right? So
Yes.
what kind of prevalence do you find with that sort of thing in your students?
Yeah, this is often what comes up in the stress management classes is I have an exam coming up, I have a test coming up. Yeah, I'm really, really worried about it. And I mean, it ranges from, oh, I've studied, I'm okay, to, full on stress symptoms like, a racing heart, sweaty palms. Not being able to sleep the night before is a big one. And also when they get into the test going blank, which of course is terrifying.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I've had that feeling. Yeah. So that impact on them, what do you think the long-term impact is of that test stress?
It's really hard to be feeling those symptoms sometimes for days, even weeks on end. So it takes a real toll on students just in their general health, right? To be feeling that kind of stress.
Yeah.
And of course, the big worry for them is that if they're that stressed out when they're doing the test, how well are they going to do on it? So they have, that worry as well.
Right. And do you find that it's compounded with each experience? Do you think it gets worse?
I really think it does. The students who seem to say to me, I've studied, I've done everything I can, and that's their attitude. They don't seem to have past experiences of having difficulties with exams. Whereas the students who tell me I'm very stressed out, they often reference past experiences that they've had.
Right.
Yeah,
so you get high school or public school, they've had bad experiences with
yes.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that in EFT, we work on releasing the negative emotions from a learned experience. So the specific events in our past that we've learned from and have taught us to be anxious about a current experience, that's one of the clinical applications of EFT. We're not going to get into that today. We're just going to kind of do some basic tapping on the here and now, but that's something to consider, right? So if someone has had a really bad test experience or multiple difficult test experiences, they're going to be more prone to having test anxiety, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. So it's as if when they walk into that room to do that particular exam, they're bringing with them every experience that they've had into that room with them. Yeah.
Right. It's kind of classical conditioning, right?
Yeah.
So what's your experience with EFT? Tell me how you found me, because, we started doing EFT in your classroom. So tell me what your experience was with that.
Yeah, well, actually, I was introduced to EFT through my mother because she's a practitioner as well. And so I became familiar with the techniques in that way, but I wasn't practicing it, routinely. And then it just started coming up more and more, and students started talking to me about EFT, that they'd heard about it, which of course is when I sought you out to come into the classroom and talk with them. After that, I took a course with you on EFT because I became really curious, thinking, if I really use this, what kind of a difference would it make in my life? And that's when it really started to work for me. I got past a couple of blocks, and really started using it in my personal life. And I found that when I tap on a problem, I usually, because I have a number of stress management strategies, it's usually when I feel like, boy, I'm really blocked with this particular issue. I really need to do some tapping on this. And I found after I do tapping on an issue, it's almost like I can't even remember.
Isn't that interesting?
By the end of it, what I was concerned about. Yeah, it's great.
I know. It's really hard to describe that until people have experienced it for themselves. It's really
very
bizarre.
hard to describe the feeling that the problem dissolves.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Cool, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more specifically about what it is. If there are any dangers or concerns with it, I'll talk about my experience with it, and then we'll do a little demo. Okay.
That's good.
So from my perspective, so I've been practicing EFT as a holistic health coach. So I'm not a mental health professional, so everyone should know that. I am back in school, obviously, for social service work, but I use EFT as a stress management tool for people. And I teach it to people to use it as a stress management tool, a self-applied stress management tool. So the idea is that you address a problem, whatever the problem might be. In our case, it's going to be test anxiety or exam stress, something along those lines. And you call it what it is while you tap. And you tap specifically on these points on the body, these acupuncture meridians on the body. We know that these points make a difference because they've done studies on sham points, just tapping anywhere randomly, and that doesn't seem to work. It doesn't work. They actually just reproduced that last month. There was another study published that reproduced an original study about tapping on sham points. So we know that tapping on these particular points on the body, somehow there's a body-mind connection, and that allows the stress to dissipate and allows us to think more rationally and clearly and reduces that stress response. So the idea is we tap on this problem. We say, even though I have this blank, whatever the problem is, test stress, this anxiety, I acknowledge it. And I'm okay anyway. That's kind of a basic way to frame it. Basically, it's an acceptance phrase with the problem. And then we tap through these particular points on the body, and we'll show people where these are. I have a tapping diagram we can throw up so people can screenshot that or whatever they need to do as we tap through these points. And it looks kind of strange, right?
It does.
Yeah. And it sounds kind of strange. And I usually encourage people to just suspend their disbelief long enough to try it a few times and see if it works, because almost always you're going to feel a relaxation response.
Yeah, and so that's a question, Ellie. Is it going to work for you even if, you're not completely buying into it when you first start?
That's a good question. And it seems to be the case that it does. It's not a placebo effect. It's not something you have to believe in for it to work. There is something real physiologically going on here as we tap on these acupuncture meridians. So it's not anything woo-woo. There's over 200 clinical studies now published on EFT. It's becoming one of the most well-studied interventions in mental health. And there are two applications of EFT. There's the clinical application. So something if you went to a clinician, a mental health professional, I have a number of colleagues that are psychologists or social workers, and they're using EFT clinically in a practice, kind of like you would use CBT, or in combination with cognitive behavior therapy. But that's not what we're doing. We're using it as the self-help tool because it's kind of like two things in one. So you don't really have to believe in it for it to work. So I would encourage anyone, even if you look at it, and I get that a lot, right? When I do these presentations, I get a lot of eye rolls and I get a lot of crossed arms and people that just refuse to try it. And that's fine, to each their own. But I would just encourage, if you're just sitting in your room and no one's looking at you anyway, then
why not?
Hurt, right? Yeah, why not? Give it a try. See if it makes a difference. Okay. So did you have any other questions?
I guess the other thing is, I mentioned that I wait until, I have a big problem before I start tapping. And, sometimes we've recommended this to students who just have such a block when it comes to tests and exams. But what about a student who just experiences some nervousness and, a bit of memory loss, let's say, when it comes to write an exam? Can it, should they use it for some of those more minor difficulties as well?
Yeah, why not? It doesn't have to be a major problem for it to work. If you can up-level your performance by getting your rational, logical mind more online, because that's one of the things that happens when you're in a stress state, you're not really accessing all that you could of those frontal lobes, right? So
yes, that's right.
Memory, ration, logic, all of that is housed in a part of the brain that's not terribly accessible when you're in a high stress state. So even if it's a low stress state, tapping is going to improve that ability to be calm, to be rational, to think it through. So yeah, I would say try it anytime. I use it certainly whenever I need to perform, or I just want an edge. Like I'll tap even just on the way to the gym. I don't necessarily feel stressed, but there's just a nice body relaxation response that kind of gets you online.
Wonderful.
So yeah, you can use this for anything, really. Okay. Any other questions?
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me just talk a little bit about who I am and when it comes to EFT. So I've been practicing EFT clinically in my practice. So I have a practice, Evolution Wellness, and I am the only Canadian so far that's certified in EFT through ACEP, which is the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology there in the US. And I'm an advanced practitioner with ACEP. So I do have, quite a bit of experience in applying EFT and also knowing where to not apply EFT. Because when it comes to really serious mental health, any serious disorder of thought, it's not an appropriate place for me to work with people with EFT. So we're using it just in that capacity as a stress management self-help tool and teaching people how to use it in that way. Okay, so I think we're kind of ready to start. Yeah, okay. So I think what we'll do, people can use this to tap along. So you can just watch the first round if you want to. And Cheryl, you're going to tap with me, right? I'm going to lead us.
I will, yeah.
I'm going to lead us. So I'll do like I would do if I was with a client. I would say and I would do the actions and speak the words, and they would just follow me. So if someone's following along, you can do the same thing. You can listen to what I say, and then you can repeat with Cheryl as we go through it. So we're going to do maybe 3 to 4 rounds here. And a good thing to do before we even start is to take a couple of breaths and to tune in to the stress. So if you have a particular test in mind or an exam in mind that is creating the stress, then you would just think about that. So, and when you think about it, often people will get an emotional response. Like you can feel anxiety in your stomach or in your chest, or you can feel a little pressure or tension, or it might be all mental. It's going to be a little bit different for everyone, but we generally start with a rating on a scale of 0 to 10. So 0 is there's no stress at all, and 10 is the worst stress you've ever experienced. So you give it a number. It's just subjective. So you just guess. You don't have to, agonize over the number. You just give it a number, and then you do a round, and then you check the number again, and you do another round, and then you check the number again. And you keep doing rounds. You can continue to do this for 10, 15 minutes until you get it to a 0. Ideally, it's a 0 and you're feeling completely calm and know that you're going to nail this test. Or, you can just do a few rounds and take the edge off. So whatever feels comfortable, the more you do, the closer you can get it to a 0, the better. Because that means you're at optimal function at that point, right? Okay, so I would just encourage people to take a second, tune in to this stress or exam, this test or exam stress, or this anxiety, whatever you want to call it. Give it a number on a scale of 0 to 10. And then we start by tapping. The first time I'll go through the points and I'll kind of show where those are. So the first point is on the side of the hand. It's called the karate chop point. It's very scientific. So you tap on the side of the hand, usually with 2 fingers, and you're tapping on that meaty part of the little side of the hand. Can you see that, Cheryl? Is that working? You can tell what that is? Okay.
Yeah.
So you start there and you repeat after me. So this is what we call the setup phrase. So the setup phrase is this is where the problem is, and accepting it at the same time. Okay, so we would say, even though I can feel all this stress about that test, I acknowledge it and I'm okay.
Even though I can feel all this stress about this test, I acknowledge it and I'm okay.
Right. And then we go to the top of the head. So about 2 fingers. So if you take your thumbs and put them in your ears, and right where your middle fingers come together on the crown of your head, it's going to be under your headband probably, you're going to tap right there on the crown of the head, and you're just going to say the reminder phrase. And the reminder phrase is just the little piece of the problem. So we're just going to say the stress about this test.
Stress about this test.
Okay, and then we're going to take 2 fingers. We're going to go on the inside corner of the eyebrow, right where the eyebrow starts. If you're wearing glasses, sometimes you have to take them off to get at it, but if you can reach over your glasses, great. So you're going to tap on the inside corner of the eyebrow, this stress about this test.
Stress about this test.
And they're going to slide the fingers down the eyebrow, where the eyebrow, at the end of the eyebrow, in the very shallow of the corner of your eye. So it's really right in that corner on the bone of the eye socket. And you're going to tap there and say it again, the stress about this test.
Stress about this test.
And then we take those two fingers and we slide them directly under your eye, again on the bone and the eye socket. So if you're looking straight ahead, it's going to be right under the pupil. Tap there, the stress about this test.
Stress about this test.
And then directly under the nose, stress about this test.
Stress about this test.
And then underneath the bottom lip, or the chin point, the stress about this test.
Stress about this test.
And then on the collarbone. So the collarbone, if you run your fingers along your collarbones, you can feel the round down on those bones. You're going to go directly below one of them. Doesn't matter which side, doesn't matter which hand. For all of these points, you can just pick a side, doesn't matter. So you're going to go right underneath that bone. And again, say the stress about this test.
Stress about this test.
And then the last point is underneath the armpit. So if you put one hand in your armpit and you take the other hand and you just go directly below that hand, kind of right on the seam of your shirt, midline of your body, the stress about this test.
Stress about this test.
Okay, so then we stop and we take a breath. And then we rate it again. So on a scale of 0 to 10, if we started off at an 8, it might be lower. It might
I
not.
already feel more relaxed because I've done it. I know how good. I don't have any test stress right now, but I already
That's
feel
a good point. That's a good point. You can tap along with this even if you don't have that test stress, because it doesn't really, we're still calming the body. So, okay, so get your new number and don't fret if it hasn't changed. That's okay. We're going to try it a few times. And you might find it drops and you might not. I mean, this doesn't work 100% of the time, all the time. It kind of depends on the situation. So this is a good tool to try. And if it doesn't work this time, I mean, email me. I can help you probably work through some of the bugs, okay? So we're gonna do it again. And this time we might get a little fancier with the language. We're not gonna be that simple this time, but you can certainly be that simple. So we're gonna try this again. Side of the hand, even though I still have some of this stress about this test.
I still have some of this stress about this test.
I acknowledge that and I'm okay.
I acknowledge that and I'm okay.
Okay, and then we go to the top of the head again. I still have stress about this test.
Still have stress about this test.
I'm still freaking out about this test.
Still freaking out about this test.
I'm afraid I'm going to fail this test.
Afraid I'm going to fail this test.
I'm afraid I'm going to draw a blank.
Afraid I'm going to draw a blank.
I'm afraid I won't be able to pass.
Afraid I won't be able to pass.
I'm afraid I'll forget everything I've studied.
Afraid I'll forget everything I've studied.
I have a lot of stress about this test.
I have a lot of stress about this test.
All the stress I feel about this test.
All this stress I feel about this test.
Okay. So now we take another breath. So I got a little more specific that time on things that I'm guessing people are saying to themselves, right? This is the kind of standard things. If there are specific things that you're saying to yourself, our own self-talk, use those things. If one of those resonates more than another, if it's, I'm afraid I'm going to blank, then use the, I'm afraid I'm going to blank. I'm afraid I'm going to blank, right? So what's contributing to that stress test for you? So that's a good approach, to just be a little bit more specific about what your particular fear is, okay? So we take another breath, we do another rating on a scale of 0 to 10, and we're gonna do it again, okay? So back to the side of the hand. Even though I still have a lot of stress about this test.
I still have a lot of stress about this test.
I acknowledge it.
I acknowledge it.
And I'm okay.
Okay.
Right, go to the top of the head. I still have a lot of stress about this test.
Still have a lot of stress about this test.
My whole body is stressed about this test.
My whole body is stressed about this test.
What if I could just relax?
I could just relax.
What if I've done everything I can do?
What if I've done everything I can do?
What if I could just relax?
What if I could just relax?
And do my best?
Do my best.
I still have stress about this test.
Still have stress about this test.
What if I could relax?
What if I could relax?
And just do the best I can do?
Just do the best I can do.
Still have stress about this test.
Still have stress about this test.
And it's okay.
That's okay.
All right, so stop there, take another breath. So there are language skills involved in EFT, right? Like even if you just said those words, most people would find that they would probably feel a little better initially until they got in front of the test. And then their anxiety would shoot through the roof again, right? Like being able to say, I've done everything I can do. Like that's kind of the cognitive behavior approach, right? Like I've done everything I can do. And we try to convince ourselves that that's going to be okay, but it doesn't seem to diminish the stress when it comes time to write the test, right? Would you agree?
That's right. That's right. That's what happens for some people. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a difference when we add the tapping. It's
very much.
It's like it lands better. It's like there's a more concrete shift. It's not just words.
Yes.
And so when it comes time to write the test, the language is recalled, the feeling is recalled. I've done everything I can do. Here we go. I've done all I can do. And there's a calmness that goes along with that.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's like it feels very real when you have the stress, and after you do the tapping, it doesn't feel like it's a real thing anymore. It completely loses its power.
Yeah. So that's 3 rounds. And I would say if someone feels like they're making headway and they want to do more, I would just rewind this and go do those 3 rounds again, or do the last round around, do whichever one kind of resonates with you or calls to you or felt good, until it feels like I've done everything I can do. And now I'm as ready as I can be. Because, I mean, we could always be more prepared. The reality is we could always say to ourselves, I should have been more prepared. But, I mean, when you've studied and you've done everything you do, and sometimes we don't study, right? So sometimes we go in completely unprepared. And I would say that probably causes a lot more anxiety and stress. So this isn't going to take away your need to study. You know, like you still have to do the work. But once you've done the work and you've done everything you can do, then it's being calm and being able to draw on what you've learned and what you know. If you haven't learned it, you're not going to be able to recall it. And of course, if someone has learning problems and memory problems, that's a whole other, ball of wax that needs more support than this. We're really just trying to help those people that have done the work, they know the material, and yet they go to do the test and they just can't recall it, or they panic. And as soon as, that feeling, as soon as you put your pen down, you're like, oh, now I remember the answer to number 3. That's the worst. Or as soon as you leave the class and you talk to one of your classmates and they, or you just hear them talking about it and they say something, it's like, oh, right, I forgot all about that, right? So the idea here is to just get you to that point where if you've done the work, you can recall it, do the best job you can do.
That's a really good point, Ellie, because when students do talk to me about the stress they have with tests, the first thing I suggest is go and see a student success facilitator to find out if you're following all the strategies and using all the strategies you can, and the study skills, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to have that foundation.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, this isn't a replacement for that. No. This is just another tool to just help with that anxiety.
All that come through.
Yeah, that gets in the way, and then you can use the foundation of skills you have. Yeah, I agree. Exactly. Absolutely. Okay, so I think we can finish there. I'm gonna briefly bring up my share screen so you can see the tapping points, the karate chop point, and then we went to the top of the head first. So I like to do them in that order: top of the head, then eyebrow, side of the eye, under the nose, the chin, the collarbone, under the arm. That's a full round. So people can screenshot that or do whatever they want with it. It's just a basic diagram of the tapping points. Okay, so that's all I have. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time and your help with this.
Thank you, Ellie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And do you have a contact info if people want to talk to you about their stress or get some help with that? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can email me at crobinson@sl.on.ca.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'd be happy to talk to anybody who has any questions about stress or about the course itself.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl. And you can reach me, ellen.steele@student.sl.on.ca. And follow Voice Podcast on all your social medias. So we've got a YouTube channel, Voice Podcast, Instagram at SA Voice Podcast, and we're on SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, all the good stuff. Okay, so that's all for now. Thanks, Cheryl. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye, Ellie.